finished all my paintings?
Have I finished all your paintings? The answer to
In other
that's
words,
no.
are they framed?
Oh, the little ones for the show,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what
Yeah.
we're talking about, right?
Oh yeah, no, they're fine. It's all the other paintings that I'm doing down the line that are not done yet. So,
Yeah, that's because I gave you 2 years. So you're like, oh, I got 2 years. I won't worry about them until like maybe next January. I'll start thinking
no,
about.
I'm trying to get some ready for fall. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't want to miss out on a season, so
yeah. It's funny. I was it's like my January. I don't have anybody scheduled. It's like, oh, that seems odd. And it's like, oh yeah, it's because I told Steven we can wait 2 years. Be easier on him.
yeah, yeah. I was running on fumes, so
Yeah, that's okay. Well, we're going to start our podcast with Stephen Datz today. I've had Stephen on more than once, but he's so fun. I want to continue to have him on.
I'm that much fun, huh? Wow.
Well, you're not only that much fun, but you've got a nice show coming up. Normally, we just kind of talk about your life and what you've done, but we've done that in the past. And those actually people who are interested in that, which I would encourage them to go listen to because it's a very interesting story. Those are on the podcast, and we'll put the episodes that they are on so people will know. But really, this has to do with a special show that Stephen decided he wanted to do. Really, what was it, a couple years ago, maybe?
Yeah, it just sort of evolved. But yeah, I started really working on putting it together around December of 2020.
Yeah, so that's a long time ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So just maybe you could tell our audience what the show is and what it's about, and we'll talk about in detail kind of those things, but it's kind of an unusual show. It's a show after the death of a show, basically,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It's that's a good way to put it. The brief story of it is that between 2012 and 2018, I was involved in helping to run a plein air art show in Grand Teton National Park called Plein Air for the Park. And we were set to have one in 2019, but that didn't end up happening. And then, of course, 2020, basically, as we all know, the pandemic pretty much just shut everything down. So I
what
got to thinking about,
why didn't it happen? What happened in 2019? So you have this very successful show. It's a plein air show, it goes on for 6 years, and we'll
yeah,
talk a little bit more about it in detail, but why does something just stop?
well, because the Grand Teton Association, that was the partner organization we were working with, decided it had to stop. And there's a story there too. Unfortunately, I think it was changes of management on both sides that did not see eye to eye, and were having difficulty getting along and communicating effectively. And the Grand Teton Association that was our gateway into the park. Normally, you can't conduct unlicensed commercial activities in the park, but we had an arrangement with them which allowed us to, sell our work there at the visitor center. And when they decided to pull the plug on it, that was pretty much it. There was no way to go back.
I see. And there was like
Uh,
40 artists in this thing, right?
yeah, it anywhere between about 38 and 45 artists each year, from all over the country, and all professional established artists. I was leading the Rocky Mountain Plein Air Painters group at the time, so I was still president of that group from 2012 to 2016, and yeah, it was a great show. I mean, everybody loved it. We always got tremendous public feedback, how much fun it was, how great it was. We actually had people after the second year. We had people starting to plan their trips to Jackson around that show. So these were, families that lived out of state who wanted to come for the summer and were art enthusiasts, and they were actually making their arrangements around our show dates, which was pretty cool.
And when
Uh,
was this show? What time of It was
it
July,
was
right?
in the middle of July. So the way the show worked was, we allowed the artists to come in 10 days in advance of the opening date, sometimes a little longer. We typically let them come in after the 4th of July. And that was just open painting time from the start date, which typically was around like July 5th. Uh, for 10 days, 12 days, however long it was, they could go paint. And then we gathered everything up, all of the works that each artist wanted to enter into the show. And we set up some portable panels and lights in the Craig Thomas Discovery and Visitor Center there in Moose, which is the main visitor center for the park. And we would hang up, several hundred paintings that had not existed a week before. So it was really pretty tremendous. And it was a great kind of cross section of different views and different aspects of not only the park, but Jackson Hole at large, from the viewpoints of 40 different artists working in different mediums. So it was kind of unique. It wasn't unprecedented. Grand Canyon had a similar show. Zion National Park had a similar show.
Doesn't the Grand Canyon one still exist? I think they still do it, don't they?
I think they're still doing it. Yeah. I haven't checked into it lately though.
Yeah.
But so anyway, the show ran successfully for we actually had 7 shows. The first one was in 2012, and then we had one each year subsequently through 2018. And then I don't have all of the information. I know what transpired from my perspective, but in 2016, I stepped down from the presidency of the Rocky Mountain Plein Air Painters Group, and somebody else stepped up, and then there was a leadership change at Grand Teton Association as well. And so I think that was partly just those two things happening simultaneously.
Right.
And when new leadership comes in, new directors come in, and I think there was just a change of opinion about the show. I think it boiled down to, from my understanding, kind of a conflict of ideas about what constituted being on mission for the Grand Teton Association. They run the visitor center gift store, and they run all the other park-related retail operations at all of the various visitor centers and lodges and things like that. And I think the gal that I worked with, Jan Lynch, in her mind, I think that this was outreach. The art show was outreach because the artists were out in the park painting, and they were visible. And I think the new leadership kind of didn't see it the same way, and they were not interested in spending money on the show the way that it had been. And it takes money to run an art show. So
I assume they made money off this too, though, didn't it?
Yeah, there seems to be a difference of opinion about that. One of the things that came up after the leadership change at Grand Teton Association was that they said the show had never made a profit for them because we were asking employees, we needed at least one Grand Teton Association employee at the show to make it legit, help process sales transactions through their system, that sort of thing. And so they basically claimed that they had lost their shirts paying people overtime to work the show. And I'm like, I didn't quite see how that calculated out quite right. The math seemed funny because I think over the 7 years that we ran, their share of the gross was something like $210,000 or $215,000. So I was struggling to see how you could spend $215,000 on 3 days worth of overtime over 7 years for one employee. Well, what do I know? So
that's why you're an artist and we're in business. Yep.
Yeah.
No, make enough that year.
Yeah.
Well, clearly it was a successful event. People liked it. People bought. They came.
Oh, yeah.
Artists clearly liked it, right?
Yep.
And it was kind of, was it really almost, it seems like a sense of culture in place. So you have all these plein air people that all have kind of like-minded sense of what how they see the world, maybe in a weird way. Is that true?
Oh, I think that, yeah, very much so. I mean, it was very frequent to see artists painting in groups or going on hikes or what have you. Everybody was sharing stuff all over social media. Being not on social media much, I was actually the last person to find out about a lot of the stuff that was going on, where it's like, oh, hey, we ran into some local painters, or oh, hey, a bear came out of the woods and started licking paint off my palette. Here's the photo. Like, what? So there was a huge enthusiasm for having that time. And a lot of plein air events, it's very compressed. You only get a few days to paint. So we really wanted this to be something where the artists could just stretch out and take it easy and explore. And yeah, there was a lot of interaction, and then everybody was getting together at the end of the day. Dornan's kind of became a de facto gathering point for everybody after the sun went down. Um, so there was a real sense of, I think, we're doing this, number one, because we love the place. It's an amazing place to paint. And then number two, the idea when we started was that, the proceeds from the show and the Grand Tetons Association kept essentially gallery commission. I mean, that's what they were taking out of the gross. And the understanding we had was that this was going towards their budget, so it was helping the park because that's what they did. They would help through different education initiatives and, trail signs, books, things like that, that they were paying naturalists to write and things like that. So there was a sense for us, I think, in the group and the participants that this wasn't just kind of another plein air show for the sake of a plein air show. It was something that was actually making a contribution to the preservation and enhancement of the park.
And bringing people together as a culture too. Those individuals that are really interested in plein air painting, outdoor painting, you get it's like a club almost. You get to get together and talk and share ideas and watch other people paint. I'm sure there's some teaching that goes on between you guys, just guys and girls, just because, that's what you do, right? You love to share.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very collegial couple of weeks. And artists would volunteer to be at the visitor center, so that if the public came through and they had a question about the paintings that one of the GTA docents couldn't answer, there was usually an artist there who could say, oh yeah, well, here, this is this composition, or this was the color choice and what that means. And it was exciting to me because it's rare that plein air painters or artists in general really get to be so visible in a public setting. I mean, I think Grand Teton National Park gets something like 3 or 4 million visitors a year, and most of them come in the summer. And so to be able to kind of interact with people at the roadside there, I spoke with more people who just stopped to chat, and they said, oh, we had no idea that, you could do this, and this is amazing. And you make a living at this? Yeah, sure do.
Some of you do.
Yeah. When it's working right, you do. And so it was a chance to kind of show people that, art is still a viable thing, and there's still artists out there. And, the kids loved it. In fact, the last few years of the event, we had a special program just for kids. They would go out in the morning. We'd pick a location and we'd take all these kids out. They had to sign up in advance, of course, but we had like 8 or 10 artists, professionals that were part of the show, take a group of kids out to a location, and they would all paint together on location. And then at the end of the painting time, which was like 2 or 3 hours, I think, we had a lunch served, and the kids all got to have their paintings critiqued. And I mean, it was great. And the kids loved it. I think the parents really loved it. It was something we were pretty proud of, as far as the various things that we did during the show to try to increase the public outreach.
Right. And so during the 7 years of doing this, clearly you paint pieces for the show and things, but there's also pieces that you don't finish. There's pieces that the sun's going down or rain comes in and you can only do a drawing. You can only capture the moment, with the plans of, well, I'm going to keep doing this every July, and I can always fill these in and work on them. And then kind of suddenly there is no more plein air part for the Tetons, right?
Yeah. That was pretty much it. I mean, the suddenness with which it ended, it basically was my successor, I think, and the new head of the Grand Teton Association just they were button heads. And to kind of retroactively claim that, they didn't see any profit from the show was a little weird, because we had never heard that in all of the years that we'd been doing it. It was like, oh, this is great. We made X dollars this year. This is fantastic. Right. We always thought, it was profitable for them. Right. And it really just boiled down to communications kind of went bad. and
Yeah.
broke down. And then we got a letter from the Grand Teton Association. This was like February of 2019. I was actually on an email conversation with the outreach director at the GTA talking about the redesign for the new banner that we were
Right.
going to do that year, when this letter drops into my inbox and basically says, sorry, we're focusing on other priorities. So it was like, what? And I'm emailing my gal and going, have you heard about this? What's going on? And yeah, it was a complete surprise to us, to me, and to the rest of the RMPAP board. So that sort of it stung a little bit. This was a show that I had worked on from the start. I had gone up there in January of 2012 and actually had the conversations with the park and with the Grand Teton Association and made the pitch for why we should do this. And so I had a kind of a personal investment, probably more than I realized in the longevity of it and the success of it. And it sort of stuck in my craw the way it stopped. And the RMPAP tried to revive it in 2020. We had a venue lined up. It wasn't in the park, it was in town. But we didn't get enough support from the artists that we
Well,
were.
and that's COVID, right? 2020.
Well, yeah, we pulled the plug. We realized we weren't going to have enough participation to make the budget that we needed, because everybody was pitching in a show fee, and that's what we were going to use to finance the show, along with some sponsorship money that we'd managed to line up. And we just didn't get a good enough response in terms of numbers from people that we invited and members of the group. And so by February 15th or so of 2020, we had just decided this isn't going to work. We're not going to be able to meet our expenses the way we have it budgeted.
Yeah.
And it was already a bare bones budget to begin with. We didn't have a lot of fat to cut out of it. So the board of directors of the RMPAP just said, well, we'll just shelve it. If we can't make it run, we can't make it run. And then a month later, COVID. So
Right.
in a way, we dodged a bullet, because even had we been able to go ahead, it would have been doomed by
Yeah.
the pandemic. By July 2020, it was like we were in it. So
Right. So for 7 years, you not only participate, you really kind of are the spearheading for this whole thing. The rug gets pulled out from underneath you kind of unexpectedly. And you still have this great passion for what you did. And you have the paintings. You still have a bunch of paintings that are either partially done and or concepts that you wanted to do. And so you said, I'm not done with this.
yeah. After the effort of 2020 fell through, that was disappointing, to say the least. And the reason I had so many of these paintings that I had never gotten to finish was because I was so involved in the day-to-day operations of the show. I mean, when you're the president of the artists group and you're in charge of wrangling, 40 artists and making sure the signage is right and the banners are where they're supposed to be.
Oh, yeah. You're a gallery guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's like there's a zillion and one things. So very often I would be interrupted. I'd get out and I would start my day as if I was going to go paint all day and not be interrupted. But there were always emails, phone calls, appointments. Weather would sometimes play a role. Wildlife would sometimes play a role. You just never knew. And my idea was, well, get as far as you can, get as much information down as you can, because you can always come back.
Right.
And so that's kind of was the script of these. It's like, the phone rings, put it in the box, go do whatever needs to be done, go put out whatever fire is raging, and then maybe come back tomorrow. And so the paintings that comprise this show are 7 years worth of those sort of, I'll get back to it, tomorrow or next week or whatever. And I never did get back to them.
And what about, there's some, I know because there's a book and we'll talk about it that goes along with it, but there's some drawings in there that are very wonderful little complete drawings that have descriptions of, what this is, colors and different things. Is that a typical thing for you to do when you go out into the field and paint?
Yeah, it can be. It depends on the circumstances. typically speaking, if I'm like, I don't have anything that's going to interrupt me and I've got good light and I know it's going to remain mostly steady for a little while, I'll sometimes just jump into a painting. But when conditions are very fleeting, um, or it's something where I don't have time to paint, like I see something and just have that wow moment, but I know I don't have time to set up and actually do anything, then the sketch pad comes out, and that's when those drawings get made. So they're typically things that I just, for whatever reason, can't get to on canvas in that moment, but I want to preserve some some of my notions about, what it is, how I want to paint it, how I want to approach it. Um, those kinds of drawings are in many ways the start. Those are the first decisions that you make in the painting
Right.
process. Is what's the composition, where am I going to place these elements? So I kind of felt like even just having those, again, as a guidepost to go back to the location. The thing about the works in the book is, in every single case, I thought, yeah, I'll have a chance to go back and look at this more closely, or I'll have a chance to maybe see this again in a similar light, and maybe be able to paint it. So they were never intended to sort of be standalones as resources for paintings. But that's, when you make good notes, and I've done that for years and years and years. So just through practice, you kind of train your memory that, I can look at one of those sketches and kind of remember, okay, here's what I
Sure,
saw,
sure.
here's how it made me
Yeah, it's
feel.
memory. It's like a photo, but
Yeah.
but more detailed. Yeah, you're including all your senses, your taste, smell, touch, everything, light.
Yeah.
And so are those ones that you put in your book that goes along with the show that we're doing, did you turn those into paintings?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So in every case, each of the paintings in the book, uh, there's 19 that were unfinished. There's one that I was the last painting that I finished in Grand Teton National Park during the show,
Mhm.
but it never got put on the wall. And then the rest of them are all paintings that got started in the field up there.
Mhm.
And so the book includes that an image of that starting place, like where was the painting when I stopped,
Right.
or this was the drawing that I intended to use.
Mhm.
And then there's some text that kind of tells a little bit of the story behind the painting, where I was, what I was maybe thinking,
Right. Yeah, I
how
thought
I
that
was
was
feeling.
interesting. I liked how that was. Like, it was the weather got in the way or the bear got
Yeah,
in the way or whatever it might have been. And
yeah, that's the fun
rain.
thing about it, was that every painting has a story, and I've said that often, that plein air painting is the painting is the visible evidence of that journey, but the journey itself always has a tale behind it.
Yeah, and I think that's
So
something different about this show than ones we've done. We've done, shows before where we have lots of small works that
yeah,
you've done outside, but these actually do, not only do they have a story, you can see where you were, what you were thinking, and why it happened, but it's also captured in a book, right? You have the image and the story, which is really quite unique and rare in the sense that the amount of time, energy, and effort to go into producing a book like this, it really doesn't pay for it in a monetary sense. You're doing this for a different reason, I would assume.
yeah, it kind of just happened through a couple of chance conversations. One with one of my colleagues that was really pushing hard to help me organize the 2020 comeback. And then a gal that I think you guys have met down at the gallery, Tammy Crystal, who wrote the foreword for the book.
Yeah, I read
She's
that.
an art blogger in Jackson and has lived there for a long, long time. She's very wired in the art world up there. And, she was really hit hard by the show's absence as well. And she passed along a lot of comments from people in the community up there that, July of 2020 rolls around, there's no show. The pandemic is going on. Everybody's kind of like, we could have used something like this.
Can you imagine how wonderful that would have been to have that?
Yeah. And so she would send me notes and things that people would send to her saying, we really miss this show. And I got a few things on my Facebook page from people that, a couple of the people that had planned their trips to Jackson around it wrote me messages and said, this is just gutting to not have this every year. Um, And the more I started hearing this stuff and the more I started thinking about it, I thought, this just isn't sitting right. And it was just by chance going through my stacks of stuff. I mean, you've seen my studio, you know that there's shelves full of
Right.
old field studies. And after every show, after every summer coming back from plein air for the park, anything that wasn't finished would get taken out of the boxes and stuck in the pile.
Right.
File that one away for later, because the boxes, I need to refill them, and I've got other things going on and other places I'm going to. So I happened to cross one of these old studies, one of these old starts, and I was like, oh, huh, I remember that day. And it just kind of was the last little link in the chain with the conversations I was having and the people telling me how much they missed the show and how much I missed it. I mean, it was a blast to go up there. It's hard work, but it was also a ton of fun, to go spend 2 weeks in Jackson and
Sure.
paint in the park. And
See your
so,
friend.
yeah, it was like a family reunion every summer
Right.
in a way. So it just started, the idea started to percolate in there that I wanted to tell this story somehow. And not necessarily the story of the breakdown of how things went, but the story of these paintings that never got their moment in the sun, so to speak. Had I not been as involved as I was, more of these, probably all of them, would have made it to the wall at the visitor center and been exhibited and maybe found homes. But they never really got that chance. And so as I started thinking about it more and more, it became almost like this is something that I can do to maybe bring myself a little closure on this whole
Was going to
this
say
whole
that's
thing.
what it is. It is closure. I think
Yeah,
the whole thing is closure. And you're
yeah,
closing it not only with a show, but also memorializing it with a book.
yeah, yeah, and giving these paintings a chance to be seen,
Mm-hmm.
giving them a chance to kind of shine out there, and maybe give people who enjoyed the event, maybe people who came to it and miss it, sort of that chance to, at least through one of the participants' eyes, kind of re-experience some of the magic that those summer days produced.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a fabulous time to paint up there. You just couldn't ask for better.
Well, I would think that honestly, these paintings would be more complete than what you would have ended up if they had just ended up on the wall in the visitor center. Because, once you get it in the studio, and I know you're going to want it to be as complete a painting as possible.
Yeah,
And probably they've changed a little bit, even in the sensibility from 2012 when you're doing it to 2022. That's 10 years. I think your style has firmed up and become a little more I don't know, modern sensibilities or something. It's a different feeling. I can look at those paintings and see this cutting modern edge more than maybe your earlier plein air paintings.
yeah, definitely. And I think I mentioned that in there's a section in the book of notes about my methods. And I mentioned that specifically because I wanted people to know, hey, if you were looking for the paintings that you would have seen in 2012 or 2013 or 2015, whenever, these might be a little different. I didn't want to try to mimic the old style or a more plein air sort of style.
Right.
It's definitely a case where at the time I had available to do these, I was out of season. It's late fall going into winter. I've got other commitments the next year that I've got to be mindful of. So this was like a little side project that I could do, but I couldn't go back up there. And then I thought, if I do try to go back up there, it's trying to catch lightning in a bottle. You can go back to the same location at the same date and same time every year, and it'll be different every time.
Yeah.
It's just one of those truths of plein air painting. It's very much of that moment, that specific moment. And given that I had already started the paintings and I had already mixed some paint or I had drawings with notes, I felt like I wanted to remain true to the moment of inspiration rather than trying to go back and paint it on location and end up drifting away from the thing that originally inspired me.
Right.
So, and the plein air style is limiting in the sense that there's a point where you just you can't go any further. Light's gone, weather changes, what have you. The deadline for turning in the paintings is looming,
Right.
and you just don't have any more time to work on it. Whereas with a studio, you have the luxury of kind of taking a little more time, mixing color a little more carefully, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, this is really what all I hear is this is a work of love, really. I mean, this is, you know, a wonderful book, and it's going to be it's a hardback book, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a
Yep.
hardback book that's going to be coming shortly. This is going to come out next week, actually. So we don't know if we'll have the book quite yet, but it's coming, and each painting in the book is uh there's a painting of each piece that's in the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So the book, there are images. Each painting gets a spread, basically. Some of them get 2 pages, but that's because they're large, they're wider. Um, so that spread includes an image of where the painting was after I left it in the field, so like fresh out of the box, and then the finished product.
so this project, which really, so it's basically taken you a couple of years to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You started about 2020, and um, it's interesting to see the different types of paintings that you've done. There's a lot of paintings that, in my field, how they feel to me is ephemeral, water, and images maybe of not the light, the brightest light, but just a very subtle light. And do you think part of that is just because those are the paintings that didn't get finished because maybe there was, the moment of light was very short, or you were trying to capture something that's very difficult to capture and just couldn't do it at the moment in time?
There's definitely a few of those. Yeah, yeah. Each of the paintings, I go into a little bit of the background behind each painting, and there's a few that are just things are happening so fast that it was like I want to try to get some semblance of the idea down before I have to inevitably stop because the light is gone completely.
So we're going to open this show on the 19th of August. I believe that's the date it is. And the paintings will be here shortly.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope to get from this show that you've obviously is very close to your heart? It seems like it's much more than just, oh, we'll sell paintings. I mean, we even tempted to go, I want to keep a couple of these.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's one I'm having a real hard time considering parting with. There's a couple that have some sentimental value, and I guess for me, in a sense, I've already gotten out of it kind of what I set out to get out of it. Um, I've I've extracted all of these various starts from my piles of field studies, and I've gotten to go back and revisit each one of them and kind of put myself back in those moments again. Um, in terms of painting them, like I really tried very hard to hew as closely as possible to my memories of that moment of inspiration and not drift too much off and use the paint that I had already put down, the colors I'd mixed, the notes that I had made as the guideposts for going forward. And that was a very satisfying process. It was challenging, but it was also satisfying. As each one of these things kind of came to fruition finally, it was like, oh, okay, this feels good. This is another one that I can kind of put a period behind and move on. And also, in telling the story, I've got an introduction in the book where I kind of describe just a brief history of the event and what led me to create the paintings, finish the paintings and create the book. And that also was kind of therapeutic, just in the sense of, as you as a writer know, you kind of put down your draft and then there's iteration after iteration where you wake up and decide this whole section needs to sound different or I don't want to have that in anymore. And so it was really interesting to go through that process of trying to be a writer as well and articulate the things about why these paintings and why this part of my life was so significant to me, in a way that people would find readable, you know.
Did you write the essay before you finished the painting?
The introduction.
No, I mean each one of those paintings you talk about them.
Oh, in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. Um, some of them meant the memories were there, and I just was like, I'm going to get this down before I forget. Other ones, there were words put down during the process that I had to go back and end up editing pretty heavily, because I had a memory crisscrossed with something else, or I was out in the field up there. All told, over the 6 years or 7 years, I think I probably had, I want to say, 8 or 9 weeks, full weeks, 7-day weeks in the field. So there were a lot of paintings that got done and got signed and got put in the show, and sometimes they were in very close proximity to locations in the book paintings, and I would get memories crisscrossed in my head of like, oh, wait a minute, no, this wasn't that day. I've got to
Yeah.
I've got to think about this some more. So the process all kind of happened organically and simultaneously. I'd be working on paintings, something would occur to me about one of them, whether it was the one I was working on or the next one in line, and I'd write it down, rush in, write it down over lunch, whatever. So for me, that process has helped me to kind of come to terms with the unfinished business that I felt that I had from the show. Because I really, what it boils down to is I never did get a chance to go back and finish these on scene and hang them at the show in the visitor center. And so just getting them done was kind of therapeutic.
Yeah, it sounds like it really was therapeutic and closure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how art can be that way, that people just think you're out in the field, you paint them, you sell them, and that's it. But it goes a lot deeper than that, clearly.
Yeah. For me, I take a lot of time over what I choose to paint. I've got to feel something for it more than just kind of, that would make a great painting, and there's nothing wrong with that per se. But for me, I'm looking for subjects that say something not only about the subject, but something that has a little to do with my feelings and my view of the world and what is inspiring to me in the natural world. So there's a lot of emotional investment in each subject because it's chosen with care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's chosen with the idea that it needs to reflect something essential about me, as much as about the subject that I'm portraying.
In your selection of subject matter, basically.
Yeah, if I'm going to spend 2 or 3 hours on location painting something, it's got to be important to me in some way. I'm not just out there to get a saleable painting or a pretty view of a particular landmark. I'm kind of out there to say something about it.
Mm.
Um,
Is it
and that's
usually
one of
this?
the.
Is it usually the shadows and the light are the beacons of inspiration for you?
It can be, but it's not always the same for every painting. And I think in the book you'll see across the different paintings that are presented, there's a whole host of weather conditions,
Oh
time
yeah,
of day,
very diverse.
subjects. One of the one of the things that I always enjoyed about going up to Jackson is that there's it can be a bit of a challenge to try to make yourself stand out from a group of 30 or 40 other artists
Good
when you're
artists.
all painting the same thing,
Yeah.
and you're all painting, the Grand, or you're painting the view from Snake River Overlook or whatever. And I've been going to Jackson Hole for better than 30 years to paint. So for me, those things has to be really exceptional for me to want to stop and do another one. I enjoy the back roads, the little trails, the pulling off by the side of a road somewhere and hopping over a fence to get a view of a little creek or something like that. There's so much more up there than just the Tetons. And so for me, as the years went on, I really was interested in exploring the breadth of all the different subjects and all the different inspiration that you can find up there.
Do you ever get in a place you go, okay, this is it, I see it, I start, and then get going and go, no, it's just not getting me. I thought it was the right place and it's not.
That does happen. Yes.
Yeah. And you go, okay, I'm moving. I'm stopping now. What do you do? Just scrape the painting and go?
Sometimes I do. It depends. Like if I'm at an event where I've got a limited number of canvases and I don't have a lot of extras, then I'll wipe it down. Oftentimes though, I'll save everything, even the starts that aren't going to go anywhere, because sometimes there's information in there that you don't know you need, or there's an idea in there that you're just not quite, your brain hasn't figured it out yet. And
Mm-hmm.
you put it aside. I've had paintings that I've left aside for 10 years that I come back to them and go, that's what I was after. Now I can see it. Now that I've painted another X hundred paintings, suddenly I understand what I was after and where I went wrong.
I'm sure there's some in this show that fit that, qualification. I mean, it's been 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. Especially the ones that were that where I didn't have a canvas started, where it was just a drawing.
Yeah.
I had to think long and hard about those, whether or not to include them. And there's one in particular that the sketch is actually much different from how the final painting ended up, because the sketch was done in haste and late evening after the sun had gone down. It was nearing dark. And I wanted to get something down about this idea because I'd never seen anything like that up there before in all the years I'd been painting in Jackson. And as I was looking at that sketch, when I laid out the canvas, put it up on the easel, lay it out according to the sketch, and it just gnawed on me for like a week. It wasn't working. I was changing it, wasn't working. And I thought, you know what? The problem here is not the information that you have. It's you're not presenting the idea in the right way. And so I reduced the amount of foreground and expanded the amount of sky. It went from being mostly a mountain painting to mostly a sky painting, because that was the thing that had caught my attention. That was the original inspiration, and that was really what I wanted to say with the painting.
Yeah. I mean, that particular painting just shows how much goes into one of these things, from just a monetary time standpoint, that makes zero sense to do that. But from a creative artist standpoint, I totally get it. It's like rewriting one paragraph that just bugs you and you want to get it right when probably very few people are really going to pay attention that much to that paragraph, but for you it really makes all the difference.
Well, it does, and that's to some degree that's why we're still waiting on the finished product, because the color proofing was arduous.
Right.
And I'm still not entirely sure it's 100% right, but
Well, I looked at the book that you sent me, and I mean, those colors look good to me as far as knowing your paintings. It's like, yep, no, this looks pretty good. So I'm
yeah.
sure your publisher is like, oh my God, Stephen Datz.
Yeah.
You're
So they've
sure
been
that isn't perfect? No, that green has to be tweaked just a hair.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It doesn't make sense, I guess, from dollars per hour perspective, but there's how to put it. These things are going to live long after I'm gone,
Yeah.
right? These paintings are going to outlast me by centuries.
Hopefully, yeah.
The the book will be around, who knows where they'll drift through and end up over the years, but it's important because of that durability. It's important to me that they are as perfect as I can make them.
Yeah. And that says a lot for you because let's face it, you're a perfectionist when it comes to your painting.
Well, yeah, I enjoy saying what I want to say. And sometimes to do that, you need to mix a lot of colors and you need to have a lot of brush strokes. I admire and I'm often baffled by artists that can paint so simply. Some of Maynard Dixon's paintings, some of Ed Mel's paintings. You just see these things, they're giant and there's just huge areas of simple color. And I go, I could never do that.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that works because I see just in a field of green grass, I just see so many little vibrations and little things happening. It's like I want to get them all in there,
Yeah.
and not in a way that is disruptive to the overall shapes and the big composition, but in a way that there's fodder there for discovery.
Mm.
So that somebody who falls in love with a painting on a gallery wall can take it home and in 10 years time still be seeing new things that they never noticed before.
Yeah, I do think your paintings are like that. I looked at one of your little paintings I had bought just today, actually. And it wasn't like I was going, oh, interviewing Stephen Datz. I just literally went by it, caught my eye, and I looked at it and go, man, this is there's a lot of complexity in this little painting. So, and I've got, and on where it was, there's like 6 Ed Mel paintings all around it and yours. And that one, for whatever reason, just caught my attention. So, clearly you're accomplishing whatever you're hoping for, at least to people like me.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Yeah, it defies kind of a categorical, it's this or it's that. For me, there's a joy in mixing subtleties of color and taking a big puddle of like, this is blue and yellow and it makes green. But now I'm going to make a cool green. I'm going to make a warm green. I'm going to make a gray green. And I'm going to get all these things working together in this little area and it's going to just harmonize and pop. There's a real thrill in that particular process.
I bet.
And that, if that can translate over to something in the painting that gets you to look at it again and again and again over the years that it hangs on your wall and see interesting things in it each time you do, then I feel like, yeah, that is something. That's really something because it's easy, I think, for people to sort of assume a painting's just a painting. It's just a thing. It's a static, inanimate object, and it just decorates your wall and takes up space. And for me, the art that I choose to collect isn't like that. I try to find things that surprise me, that I can look at, over and over and over again and never get tired of. And so that's kind of my aspiration for my own work. And it's, in the context of this book, it's just that little bit more excitement about the project, and hopefully people will see the work and feel just as excited that I've achieved that, that I can give them a little slice of those heavenly days up in the Jackson Hole during the summer that lives a little bit on the wall. That's not just a kind of a static decoration, if you will.
Yeah, hopefully people who do buy art, they look at it that way. I mean, I look for an emotional, something emotionally pops for me, and it can be positive, it can be negative even, but I want that every time I see a painting, that there's something that gives me energy, some kind of energy comes off of it. Because if it doesn't, then you're right, then it's just decoration. And I got too many limited wall spaces to have decoration on them. I want things that give me joy or even sadness. I don't care what it is. I have paintings that actually give me, that produce sad emotions, but I like that because I can get it every time. Why do we read a book that we, know might be a murder mystery and is going to make us upset at one time? Because there's something about it that's compelling, or we watch a movie that we know is going to give us angst, but we watch it anyway because, we can relate to it, or a song, the same kind of thing. think art can do the same thing. The subtleness of some of these paintings, there's a sense of this. I don't know. It's there's some of these really capture, I think, have an ephemeral sense to them, you know,
Yeah,
timelessness almost.
there's a breadth of emotion in just the experience of being up there. And there's a couple of them that are a bit more moody, they're a bit more atmospheric and a bit more gray. And those are they wouldn't seem to be like naturally subjects that would jump out at me, because I'm always out, looking for that great low light or the bright colors or whatever.
Right.
But those also capture the personality of that valley in as
Yeah.
much as the brilliant colors and the brightly lit mountains and whatnot. And that's, like I said, that's where I was kind of trying to show other faces of Jackson Hole besides just the well-known views, um, and also give a sense of emotional breadth to the show,
Hmm. I
to
would
give
think
you.
sometimes those are the hardest ones to paint.
They can be, but it's an interesting process, because really what you're doing is really working much more in terms of subtlety and restraint,
Mm,
but still trying to keep things lively. I enjoy those challenges, and that's part of the reason why I can usually never hesitate to bite one like that off every so often and just paint a gray, rainy day or a real
right.
snowy, foggy kind of day, because there's a wonderful challenge there when you remove the obvious kind of like contrast and punchy color to make something that still engages and is still lively, but also communicates the sort of mellow, muted emotion,
Hmm.
that those kinds of scenes can create. And to me, they're introspective.
Oh yeah.
The expressive, uh, high contrast, the bright colors and things of a bright sunny day is very sort of ebullient and expressive, whereas the more muted colors and gray atmosphere of like a foggy or a rainy type day to me, that's an introspective kind of a painting. It has that emotional note to it.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, where do you think plein air painting is today? I mean, 10 years past when you first started. I mean, there's still, plein air magazine, which is a wonderful magazine. There's lots of people still have interest, but it does seem like it's changed somewhat in the last, well, 15 years for sure. Am I correct, or am I reading it wrong?
I mean, from my subjective point of view, there's a couple of ways you could look at it. As an artist, you know, I've been painting in the field for a quarter of a century. I started painting outside when I was 25 years old.
Right.
As you get older, you get slower. It takes a little longer to get where you're going sometimes, or to get your stuff set up. Uh, Sometimes it takes longer to select, when you're starting to do your sketches and you're thinking about putting a composition together. You just I find that I'm more deliberate about it than I used to be. Um, as a as a plein air painter, looking out at what's going on now, I don't know. To me, it seems like one of the great things about plein air painting is there's a great sense of camaraderie amongst plein air painters. Um, and it is one of those things that it's easy to be enthusiastic about, and it's kind of accessible. It's like, you can, for a few $100, you can go get a field easel and some paint. And if you're willing to drop a few more hundred or $1,000 or whatever, you can go to a workshop and learn the ropes. Um, and in some ways that's wonderful, and in some ways it's kind of created a situation where there's a lot of plein air painters out there now. I mean, it seems like that to me. It seems like there's a lot more people plein air painting and doing so professionally than there ever have been before. And I've remarked on a few occasions how, with the proliferation of workshops, Because if you were successful as a plein air painter, that was an easy way to supplement your income. Teach a couple workshops. I mean, the Scottsdale Artist School is a great place. Um, I think we've come to a point where that success may have become somewhat of a limit as well, because successive generations of workshops, it's like we're just creating more and more and more people who are out plein air painting. But in my view, that's not enough. Like, just because a painting is done on location doesn't make it a good painting.
Yeah, that's for sure.
There has to be an animating idea behind it. There has to be an emotional connection to the subject, to the landscape that you're in. And you have to develop your own voice. More than anything, maybe that's kind of where I sort of see the current trend is, I just see a lot of plein air painting. And if you covered the signature up, I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell which artist had done it.
Mm.
And that harkens back to something I was told by a gallery owner long, long ago when I was first approaching galleries. The guy was very nice. I made an appointment. I took some work up, and he said, this is good work for where you are in your career. The problem is, I can tell you exactly who your teachers are. And I already have them in my gallery. I don't need a carbon copy. I need something new and something unique.
Right.
So, you need to go develop your perspective and your technique and your voice a little bit more to set yourself apart from the people that you take inspiration from and the people that have actually taught you. And I was like, oh, okay, that's good advice.
Yeah, that is actually excellent advice.
Yeah, it's some of the best things that I've ever been told by other artists or by gallery owners, whatnot, have been, hand in hand with a rejection.
Right. No, it is. I mean, sometimes I think you're incumbent as a gallery owner to try to give some, good advice like that, not harsh advice, not, things that destroy someone's ego, because I think this is exactly the wrong thing, but something that can actually help propel that individual to look at things more in a different way. And there's a reason we've been doing it for 30 years as a gallerist. I've learned a few things. I've seen a few things. I understand a few things about sales, about, people's emotion, about, the trajectory for an artist's career. If you want to have a long career, and a successful career, you need to find your own path and voice, whatever that may be.
And that can be one of the more tricky things to do, because as a young artist, you're looking for approbation. You're looking for your mentors or your teachers or whoever to sort of go, yeah, you're on the right track there. Good work. The danger with that, and I think especially with kind of I guess, workshop culture, for lack of a better word or phrase, the danger with that is that it can be tempting to start creating, whether consciously or subconsciously, you're creating clones of yourself. You're praising the things that you see that are also things in your own work that you do intentionally and that you like. One of the harder things to do is to take a student that you don't, maybe you don't see eye to eye with them on how they put their paint down or what kind of canvas they use or what kind of brush they use. If you can give that person something, just a seed of something or a nudge in the right direction, just say, listen, you know what? I wouldn't do it that way, but I think you're onto something there. Speaking from an objective point of view, visually, yeah, there are some things happening in your painting. So, would I ever want to have one on my wall? Maybe not. But is it going to be good? Absolutely. And I haven't done a lot of teaching, but years and years ago, I got invited to judge a show up in a little town in Colorado called West Cliff. And part of the deal was, well, it's a small art association. We can't really pay you very much. But if you want to come up and do a 3-day class, we'll get students signed up and we'll arrange the whole thing. Great. Okay. I'd never been there before, so I was interested to go explore. And, I'm always looking for new places on the map that I haven't been to. And there was a gal in the class that she just blew me away. Her whole underpainting was like neon colors.
Hmm.
I just was like, I can hardly look at this thing. This is so crazy. And she had a method. She was like, well, I do this on purpose, and let me explain to you why. And uh, so she did her thing, and I gave her the best advice that I could. And when I came back a couple months later to judge the art show, she had a painting in that show. And I swear, if that painting hadn't already sold, I'd have bought it. It was that good. And it was good because she did that crazy neon color thing. It was just a little rural view of the San Luis Valley in August, like in bright sunshine. And the tonality of it was just brilliant. So
Did
I
she?
put a ribbon on it, and I was like,
Yeah.
dang it, I
Did
missed
she
out.
go on to make a career in painting, or do you know?
I don't know. I didn't really keep up with her. I think she's still painting, but as I think is the case a lot of times for women in the arts, there's lots of other commitments that go along. I think she had family to take care of and kids, parents, whatnot. And so I don't know that it was necessarily something that she was focused on as a career 100%.
It's also, I think, harder for women because I think there are just built-in biases that they have to fight every single freaking day, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's the thing about it is, I've met several women that I thought she could really go places, but kids to take care of, or parents, aging parents sometimes to take care of, or a husband. I knew one gal whose husband had been injured on the job
yeah,
and required a lot of care because he was badly injured and barely survived. So and it's just sort of, it falls on them to
yeah, you
do it.
get this and you get the biases that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
And that was one of the things that I always enjoyed about going up to Jackson was it never really was something that was an agenda item, but in terms of the Rocky Mountain plein air group, it was about evenly split between male artists and female artists.
yeah,
And we always tried to maintain some balance in terms of the invitations that we put out there to new artists, because there were a lot of, and there still are a lot of dynamite women artists out there, and especially in the plein air area. And it's like, why haven't I heard of this person before? We need to give them a
yeah.
way to show their
Unfortunately, that
work.
falls a lot on gallerists not doing their job, and just being biased. I mean, and they're not, representing them or showing them or marketing them
Mhm.
equally. So
Yeah.
I think that's part of it, honestly, and other shows too. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's one of the things that, we all have to work on. I know I am personally. So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's a huge historical pattern. And I
yeah.
remember the first time I used to get American Art Review. I should renew my subscription, but I saw all kinds of artists, female artists in that were working, back in the day, that I had never heard of, and their paintings were amazing.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
remember one in particular, what's her name? Cecilia Bow. Incredible portraits, just absolutely incredible. I've never seen anything painted like that before or since. And it really blew me away. And it's like, yeah, she sort of worked in obscurity.
Yeah. There
What a
was a
shame.
Swedish artist that I don't remember her name right at this moment, but Dixon had written about how he had seen her work. I think it was the Pan Pacific
Mhm.
expedition, and he really it was inspiring for him.
Yeah.
So, he interesting, he's married to three artists too, but he's a guy who looked at, he didn't, I don't think he gender biased in those sense that he goes, he was looking at what their chops, right?
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, this lady has the chops. So,
Yeah. And there was a gal that we invited up to the event the last year that we were up in Grand Teton. And she was just a dynamite young painter. Like, man, it's like, I wish I could paint like that when I was that age. And so she came to the opening reception, right? 4 kids and husband in tow. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yep.
You got 4 kids. One of them was just an infant, all the way up to, I think, like 6 or 7 years old. And I just thought, I've got nothing on you.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to raise a family and be providing for them, and all of that entails for 4 children, and still have a full-time painting career.
Yeah. Committed. That's right.
My hat is off.
They have to work harder. Yeah. They shouldn't have to, but they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least at this point. All right. So anything final words you want to say? I'm excited about the show. I'm excited about the book and getting the paintings. So, it's fun. We're doing a Teton show in Tucson in the summer. I don't think it matters. The work will speak for itself.
Yeah, that's my hope. And maybe people who come into the gallery will get a little brief respite from the heat, so to speak, even if
Yeah.
it's just visual.
Yeah.
But no, this is it's one of those projects that has never been like front and center. I've always had other things going on. And so it's kind of interesting now to have it nearing completion, and to realize, like, oh my gosh, I've been working on this for 2 years. I hope everybody likes it. And I hope that that the folks who purchase art from the show and get books enjoy them, and enjoy kind of hearing the story about how these paintings, which, you know, but for the grace of God, I guess you could say, might have disappeared into the unfinished history of my work,
Yeah, they could have
have been
easily.
brought back to life.
Yeah. 30 years later, when the estate is somebody's handling the estate, and they're like, oh, I wonder what these are. Looks like
Yeah.
something he didn't quite finish,
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, there are paintings like this all the time. It's not like these are a rare phenomenon. I have unfinished paintings from all over the place. It's just the nature of the beast when you're out in the field. So this particular group, for me, it just holds a special place in my heart because of how they came to be, and the event that gave birth to them.
Yeah. It was very personal to you.
Yeah.
The way it ended was abrupt. And, you had closure that you needed, and you needed to get it through your paintings, and you wanted to memorialize what you had accomplished and what you had done for those 7 years. I get it.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what it is. So this is a special show. Don't, people who are listening or out there and go to the web and see these, realize what it takes to put together something like this, and is done strictly from an emotional standpoint and an artistic standpoint. It's not driven by finances or anything else, because if you did, you take those 2 years and do 3 big paintings, and you're going to make way more money. And it's probably a lot easier, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has merit. And I love doing shows that have merit, because this one clearly does.
Yeah, and it's it's all those things, and also artistic growth along the way. I've
Yeah.
never tried to complete paintings that I've been leaving set for 9 years.
I
That was
bet.
kind of unprecedented challenge for me to see, okay, how good is your memory really?
Yeah.
How good are you at putting yourself back in that moment really? When you've got all these years elapsed. So that was challenging, but worthwhile also, because there was some things happening in my process that I had to really look at and think about.
Yeah. I bet. I bet that was. I think that might have been part of the fun of it for you, probably.
Yeah, yeah, it was almost a little bit of a dare. It's like, all right, let's see if you're really as good as you think you are.
And were you?
uh yeah, but some of them did take more time. That is the one conceit of the studio that you don't really have when you're out in the field, is that if you hit a wall, you can take the time, you scrape your palette, save the colors, and you can walk away from it for a few days and get fresh eyes on it. Whereas in the field, it's like wham bam, it's got to be done.
Yeah. Well, we're excited about the show, and thank you for taking the time and just, sharing the history of this wonderful event that you were a great part of. And, it's fun for me to get that. This will be the most Teton paintings I've ever had at one, but I've sold Teton paintings. I've sold a lot of Wyoming, Montana paintings. Great art is great art. It sells wherever, but it'll be fun to have it in Tucson. People will be like, why is this in Tucson? It's like, because it's great art and I want great art.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time and giving me a chance to, blather on for another however long this has been going
Yeah,
on.
over an hour, minus technical difficulties in the middle.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, I'll let you get back to painting and I look forward to seeing those paintings shortly.
Yes, you'll be seeing them very shortly.
All right, thanks, Stephen.
Okay, Mark, take care.
Oh, by the way, you might want to send down those drawings, even though they're not for sale, just to put them in. I think they might add something to the exhibit.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I do. I mean, it just shows the process. I think it's interesting. Even if they're just pinned up on the wall, it's like, this is where it comes from, folks.
Yeah, well, I'll have to go search through my pile of sketches.
Yep, I know, but do it for me. Throw some in, would you?
I will.
All right, thanks. Stephen Datz, Art Dealer Diaries. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
All right, bye-bye.